Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to check out more Jurassic World Dominion figures, but this time from the Imaginext line. I have reviewed some other Jurassic World Dominion Imaginext figures already, and I felt like these guys were pretty cool enough to get up here on the channel, as we have the different hatchlings that they have out currently, and I feel like these figures, although they don't perfectly represent kind of hatchlings, they look similar in a way to like what you would expect when it comes to a hatchling, kind of, as far as Jurassic World Dominion figures go. And we had some pretty fun species, and since I do, of course, review, exaggerated dinosaurs in the Jurassic World line from time to time, like Snap Squads or the Pop-Ups or even other Imaginext figures, things like that, I figured these guys would be pretty fun to put up on the channel, and I just recently found them, so why not share the love of Jurassic World and throw these up on the channel. So we have 5 different figures here. We have a Therizinosaurus, a Giganotosaurus, a Dimetrodon, a Dracorex, and a Dilophosaurus. So some pretty fun species that they've chosen here. And I actually really quite like the packaging that they've given them, because they kind of appear to be encased in amber, which is really neat. Something that I feel like is just like a genius move when it comes to packaging for this type of figure. And you can obviously see we are looking at the Dilophosaurus right here. We have the Jurassic World Dominion logo. And then if you turn it around, you can see we have the Imaginext logo up there, as well as the species name. Not really too much else going on aside from lots of information and everything here on the back when it comes to Universal, Imaginext, all of that stuff. So let's go ahead, break all of these guys out of the packaging and check them out. So we've got all of our little hatchlings out here and standing before us now, and I will say they look pretty fun, actually. I think they look a little better than I thought they would, which I have some of these figures from the older Jurassic World line that had, like, some hatchlings. There was, like, some raptors, some compies, T-Rex, stuff like that in the older line. I'm really happy to see quite a wide array of species here in this line. They all do have some pretty darn bright and almost obnoxious, in certain cases, paintwork, but and none of them really resemble the Dominion versions as far as the coloration goes. I think the closest would probably be the Dimetrodon, but they still, again, look pretty fun, and they have a decent-looking sculpt that almost sort of resembles that hatchling-like appearance. So let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at all of these right now. So we'll start with our Therizinosaurus, and you can see that although it has, some pretty decent-looking detail, like it looks okay, it's kind of like your normal, typical style Imaginext figure, where we do have some nice, like you can see some nice feather detail through the course of the figure, but it's not overly detailed. It's not as impressive as you would see on like one of, well, I almost dropped them, on like one of the mainline Jurassic World figures. But we have a nice bluish tone of color for the majority of our Therizinosaurus. You can also see that as far as the beak goes, we have a very light gray, almost bordering on a white, and that coloration runs the entire underside of our figure. And you can see that in that area we have some pretty nice skin texture found. And we kind of have some nice skin texture through the course of the body in certain areas, like you can see it here in the leg, kind of almost looking like skin texture, but at the same time almost kind of looking like feather detail. So I'm not entirely sure what their goal was as far as the areas that would have skin texture over feathers, because this isn't very clear to me what they're trying to establish detail-wise there, but you can definitely see some skin texture here in the arms, and then some feathers kind of leading off of the back of the elbow. And then, of course, our classic Therizinosaurus claws. They are very nicely sculpted out on the figure, and they do kind of have a glossy look, as do the nails of the feet, though they don't actually have any real paint application to, well, we're losing focus there, but any paint application to insinuate nail paint. They do have a glossy look, which is at least nice. And you have a nice curve in the tail. Again, you can see some larger feathers there running along the back of the Therizinosaurus. Very upright positioning for the figure when it comes in the packaging. And you can, of course, change it, as you do have some nice articulation to the figure as well. Not anything amazing, but you have articulation in the arms and the legs, and that's really about it, but it allows at least some posing and displaying in different positions for your figure. I always love Imaginext figures simply because they have that kind of glass eye type look, and you can see this one has a really nice yellowish eye with a black pupil, and it kind of follows you. Something I've just always been really fond of. And overall, he's a pretty fun Therizinosaurus. Of course, not really looking too much like the Dominion version, but still pretty cool. Then we've got ourselves the Dracorex, which is incredibly bright. We have an orangish tone for the majority of the body, almost like an orangish yellow. And He has a really kind of like osteoderm-like appearance to him. Like he is coated in osteoderms. We have some really nice, really fine skin texture, which is actually pretty impressive when it comes to an Imaginext figure. Like that's probably some of the nicest detailing that I think I've seen as far as skin texture goes on any Imaginext figure, and that pretty much runs the entire course of the figure as far as like the main primary body goes. It doesn't really follow out onto the limbs so much, but we do have some okay detail out there as well, especially in the thigh. You could see a plethora of osteoderms and almost like a armored scoot-like appearance running down the front of the thigh. Again, a similar position to the Therizinosaurus, where we're kind of standing upright. We also have a curve in the tail, also leading the same direction as the Therizinosaurus. You can see that we have a really nice bluish tone for the upper top of the head here of our Dracorex, the kind of spiky area of the dinosaur. You can see it starts there on that nasal horn and then runs here back to the back of the head. And then we also have kind of like an off-white here for the beak leading down into the underside, similar to the Therizinosaurus. We have that coloration that runs the entire course of the underside. You can see the Jurassic logo on the bottom of the foot right there. And again, we don't have any nail paint or anything, and unfortunately, unlike the Therizinosaurus, it doesn't even look like we have like a glossy look to the nails, so it really just doesn't appear to have anything insinuating nail color. You can see a pretty nice looking hand sculpt, kind of like some scoots sort of down the fingers, or maybe at least some creasing going on. Still a pretty cool figure, and I actually do really quite like him. I'm not a big fan of the paint scheme, but the fact that the detail is so nice on him definitely makes me think he's probably one of the better ones that I've seen. But of course that will have to be determined when the review is over, because we haven't taken a look at the others quite yet. But you can see we have a yellowish eye, kind of like a yellow-green eye, and a black pupil for this one. And again, that kind of glass eye look is awesome, and also allows that really nice shine, making the eye look even more realistic. So he's pretty fun. And then we have the Dimetrodon, and the Dimetrodon actually also sports some incredibly nice detailing. Like, okay, now this one would probably be my favorite detail-wise from an Imaginext figure. You can see the nostrils sculpted out there. Again, the really cool eye. We have that kind of glass eye look on this one as well. A very similar color, I would say, to the Dracorex as far as that goes. You can see that we have like a light greenish coloration for the lower jaw. You can see the teeth of the Dimetrodon there protruding out of the jaw. And you can also see as we lead through the course of the body, the skin texture is actually phenomenal. And unlike the Dracorex, I feel like the detailing in the legs looks just as nice on this one as it does on the main body of the figure. I did repaint some of these quite a ways back when it comes to the original Fallen Kingdom baby Imaginext figures. I might have to do that again with some of these, because this detail is actually really, really well done. And with a more realistic paint application, I feel like the figure could look kind of impressive. Of course, not exactly accurate, as he has a goofy, stylized look to him, but still better. And you can also see up here in the sail of the Dimetrodon, we have a really nice reddish tone of color for the sail. And then we have kind of like a blue, like a bluish green for the majority of the body, more like just like a light blue. And again, it's probably the closest out of any of these to what the actual animal looks like in Dominion, but still not exactly what it looks like. Color-wise, I mean, of course the sculpt is far off. But you can see another curve in the tail on this one, also leading in the same position as the last two that we had taken a look at. You can also see the upper portion of the Dimetrodon is way lower to the ground compared to the rear of the dinosaur. It almost makes it look more like a quadrupedal Spinosaurus more so than a Dimetrodon, but still, you know, pretty nice looking figure detail-wise. It is phenomenal for a Imaginext figure. Like, they just usually don't have such nice sculpt and detail as far as the scale detail and skin texture, and this one really does. So currently, I would say the Dimetrodon is leading as my favorite. And then we've got ourselves the Giganotosaurus, and this one, although adorable, I really don't think it much resembles the Giganotosaurus from Dominion at all. And on the Dominion version, we don't really have like a sail. We have more ridges running along the back, but I think a lot of people are kind of taking it as more of a sail on the dinosaur, and that's kind of what Imaginext has done here. They just basically gave it a sail rather than the ridges, which really does take away from the figure and makes it look a lot more, I think, like a Jurassic-style Spinosaurus rather than a Giganotosaurus. We have a nice light blue for the majority of the body, and we have a darker blue for the lower half of the dinosaur, as well as the, again, sail-like area of the figure. I will say, though, that again, just like the last two, the detailing is actually really nice. Like, there's a lot of beautiful skin texture to the figure, and it almost looks like here in the face we even have scars, which is again something you see a lot on the Giganotosaurus from Dominion. You can also see the teeth right there and the mouth. Unfortunately, they never paint the teeth of these figures. I feel like it would really make a pretty big difference on the Imaginext babies here, but they never paint those. We do have an eye that is an alternate tone of color this time, though, which is a plus. We have an orangish tone for the eye of the Giganotosaurus. Got some pretty cute looking arms here. Yet again, no nail paint, but this time it sort of looks like we do have a glossy look to the nails, which is something that, seems to be pretty hit or miss with these figures. You've got some okay looking kind of muscle definition moving down the course of the leg, a few kind of osteoderms showing up here and there, and then of course big goofy feet for the dinosaur. We do have a curve in the tail yet again, as we usually do, but this time the curve is actually going the opposite direction, so this is the first one to break that trend and curve the tail to its right. But again, pretty cute looking figure, not anything amazing. You're not really ever going to find an Imaginext figure that I would say is amazing, but it's kind of adorable for sort of a Giganotosaurus mixture with a Spinosaurus. And then we have the final of the bunch, and that would be the Dilophosaurus. And I must say that I really don't like the coloration of this one. I absolutely hate the purplish tone, making him almost look like he's a Barney knockoff in Dilophosaurus form. I do, however, like the fact that the mouth is open, because that's something we haven't seen on any of the other Imaginext figures here in this line. As far as the Dominion figures go, though, and I really like the coloration of the eye. I like that very nice light green that we have to the eye on this one. Detail-wise, though, again, it does look really quite impressive for an Imaginext figure. Just looking here in the frill of the Dilophosaurus, like, that scale detail really pops in that area. I'm not a big fan of the orangish tones they've used for the frill or the crest. Again, not a big fan of the purple coloration. So as a whole, I really don't like the coloration they've used on this Dilophosaurus. I would have preferred something that's a little bit closer to what we see in Jurassic Park, or a little bit closer to what we see in Dominion. But even the rear of the frill actually looks really, really nice. You can see again some more very nice scale detail through the entire course of the figure. We do have a curve in the tail again, but this time we're facing back to the left, so it seems as though the only one that had a right-leaning tail is the Giganotosaurus. And again, all of the figures have that same style of articulation where we have the arms and legs, and except the Dimetrodon would be all legs because he's a quadrupedal animal. It looks like we would have like an articulated jaw, but we don't. And one thing that's pretty cool is that the frill here is actually a really flexible rubber, so that's pretty neat as well. No nail paint, again, not even a gloss coat on the Dilophosaurus, so we don't even insinuate nail paint. But as a whole, again, I really do like the sculpt of the Dilophosaurus. I think it's fun. Again, not accurate to a Jurassic World style Dilophosaurus, but they did put some nice detail into him. Just not really a very good paint scheme or paint application. Just not something that appeals to me, but it's neat to have a baby Dilophosaurus now in the Imaginext line. I will say for the most part they all stand pretty nicely as well, except for the Dracorex. He seems like he's a little top heavy or something. I don't know if maybe I just don't have the feet in the right spot. He will stand. I can get him to stand from time to time, but it takes a little work to get him to do it. So he's not really going to stand right now. We're just going to have to, I guess, allow these two beaked dinosaurs to start kissing or something to get him to stand. But all of the others seem to, well, of course the Dimetrodon stands nicely, it's quadrupedal, but all of the others seem to stand really quite nicely overall. But as far as a size goes, we're not going to measure each and every one. There's just too many. We will measure, we'll just throw it over the top here to show you, but we will measure one. I don't know which one I should choose. I guess the Giganotosaurus seems to be probably the tallest of all. So for a length from the head there to the curve in the tail, you're looking at like 3 inches and an eighth, somewhere around there, or around the 8 centimeter mark, maybe a little bit under. It's kind of hard to get an exact measurement, especially with such a nicely curved tail. And then height-wise, around 3 inches or about the 7.5 centimeter range. And now he fell over, but that was just because I didn't place him down correctly. He actually stands really nicely. But for a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Dilophosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Imaginext Hatchling figures. And you can definitely see that they are really quite small, though they do sport a fairly impressive size. Like, they're not quite minifigure size. If we bring in the Mattel Giganotosaurus mini right there and actually put it back a little bit further, and we place it next to those, you can see that they are a bit bigger than the Giganotosaurus, but still fairly small overall. I don't really know that we need too many size comparisons here because these figures are very easily accessible at most Walmarts, so you should have no problem walking in, finding them, and then seeing how big or small they are. But at the same time, again, if you are a Jurassic collector, you should probably have something that you would see here and would help to give you an idea of the size. But if not, again, just know that they are fairly small overall. So these Imaginext Jurassic World Dominion hatchling figures are pretty fun. They're not great. They're definitely not something that I say you need to run out and grab. I don't think you'll ever see that, honestly, with an Imaginext figure. They're kind of almost like, I have nothing else to purchase and I'm at the store, so I guess I'll pick these guys up type figures, because they would absolutely appeal to young kids, that's for sure. But like as an adult collector, they're not my first choice as far as Jurassic World Dominion figures to buy, though I do kind of like them from time to time, especially these kind of hatchling style figures. I've always been kind of fond of these guys because they usually sport some decent detail. They come up with some pretty fun species to include, and I do like stylized dinosaur figures from time to time, and that's pretty much exactly what these are. And this time around, we do have some pretty fun species. I really love the Dimetrodon. I think the Dimetrodon is my favorite overall because, first of all, I do love Dimetrodon in general, but the figure as a whole, I feel like has the nicest paint apps to it as far as the coloration that would be potentially natural for that figure, or for that species, I should say, and also has the best sculpt as far as the fine detail goes. All of them have really nicely detailed bodies and everything, but the Dimetrodon as a whole, I think, has the nicest detailing to it. And then we also have the Dracorex, which is pretty cool, but I'm not a big fan of the color. I just feel like it's a little bit too bright. But of course, brighter colors like this are really going to appeal to kids, and that since that's the target audience for these figures, that makes sense. Just as an adult collector, it's not my first choice coloration-wise, and still a pretty cool figure, though, and nicely sculpted as well. We also have the Dilophosaurus, which I hate the coloration of, but I like the sculpt in a way. Like, it's not terrible. It does absolutely look kind of like a, baby kind of Dilophosaurus, sort of, but the fact that we have, teeth, and some of the figures, it's not that big of a deal. Like the Dimetrodon, the Giganotosaurus, you could see the teeth, but they're not painted. But here with the mouth open, I feel like they really should have painted the teeth, because now that the mouth is open, like, we're really focused on that area. And unfortunately, we don't have that on the figure. So sculpt-wise, the Dilophosaurus is really fun. Paint-wise, not so much. The Therizinosaurus, I would say, is my second favorite of the bunch, just because I think the sculpt looks fun, even though his detail's probably like the least vibrant and the least impressive out of every one of the figures here. It still looks pretty cool, and I'm just really happy to have, more Therizinosaurus figures in the Jurassic World Dominion line. Pretty nice coloration as well that I feel like could be, natural on a dinosaur like that. And then you have the Giganotosaurus, which is probably my second to last as far as my favorites go. I'd rate the Giganotosaurus right there with the Dilophosaurus. Actually, maybe even a little lower, because I'm not a huge fan of the sculpt, and I'm not a huge fan of the paint of the Giga, but I do like the eye color, at least, so that's a plus. Fine detail-wise, it looks really nice. It's just not... I'm not a big fan of that kind of sail-like look on the Imaginext version, because that's not really how it looks in Dominion. But then again, none of these figures really look like the animals look in Dominion. But as a whole, they're still kind of cool, something that if you are looking to add a few extra random Dominion baby dinosaurs to your collection, they're not a bad way to achieve that, and they're not that expensive either. They're like $4 each, so it's not like you're wasting a whole lot of money. If you pick them up and decide you don't like them, they're okay, I guess. But if you are interested in picking these up, I would suggest heading to your local Walmart, as that's where I found mine, and they seem to be pretty well stocked at most Walmarts in my area, so you should have a pretty good chance of scoring yourself some of these if you do go and check them out. So one way or another, again, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.